In times of trauma and adversity, we must create space for connection by sharing a story of hope. Welcome to Stories of Hope Worldwide, hosted by Kerry Atherton. This podcast shares inspiring stories of individuals who have faced significant challenges and emerged stronger, offering hope and resilience to listeners all over the world. Join Kerry, the founder of Stories of Hope, every week to hear these remarkable journeys and find strength to overcome your adversity. Now, let's listen in to this week's conversation.
Welcome to another episode of Stories of Hope Worldwide. I'm Kerry Atherton and I'm your host. And today's guest is a good friend of mine, Jason Dasey. Jason is a journalist, radio host, presenter, and the pinnacle of resilience. After losing his father at 15 to suicide, he went on to forge an amazing career that took him across the other side of the world, working for Sky News and the BBC. He is a true testament to his own mantra that anything is possible if you don't give up. Welcome, Jason.
Hi, Kerry. Lovely to see you. Thank you for inviting me on the show.
So great to be chatting with you today. You have an amazing story of resilience, and you've interviewed some of the most well-known faces and people that all of us watching television and listening to radio hear and see every day. And I'm looking forward to introducing our audience to your wonderful journey against all odds, really, because when you were just starting out at 15 to pursue your dream, your mentor and dad that you love so much ended his life by suicide, didn't he?
He did. I'd grown up in Sydney just like you, Kerry, and, we're a similar age. And I had always wanted to be a journalist, and I was inspired by my dad, who was in media as well. He was in advertising, and he was the brains behind some famous TV commercials. He was also a screenwriter for TV and radio. He was a visual artist. So he was a brilliant man, and he was my hero, my mentor. And with his encouragement, I began at the age of 15 to start writing articles on sport. The local team where I was growing up, rugby league, didn't have any coverage in the local paper. I noticed it. And with my dad's encouragement, I started writing weekly reports on the team, which was a real buzz for me. And this is pre-computer time. And, we'd type it up on a portable typewriter. We'd drop it off at the office where the newspaper was. And then every Wednesday it would come out. We'd be so excited. So my dad was so encouraging for me, not just because of what he achieved, but also because he was so helpful. I was so close to him. I was the eldest of four boys. So I'm not saying I was the favorite, but I'd had the longest time with my dad. But sadly, my dad also had his demons, and he struggled with drug and alcohol addiction. And he had many years of sobriety. So I remember him as a sober dad, as someone that was always a great role model. But just in the last few months of his life, he had a tough time and he started drinking again. And we all thought that he would get through it. He went into hospital as they used to do in the time. But once he came out, I think he went through some more challenges. And sadly, just at the end of my year 10, which is this third last year of school, my mum found his body in our house. And I'd only been in journalism about 6 months. I was still at school. So it was something I did on the weekends, So it was absolutely devastating for that to happen because, this was the guy that really was the reason why I chose media, one of the reasons that I chose media, and suddenly he was gone.
Yeah. Such a difficult, horrific time for you and your family. And it was only a few days before Christmas too.
It was the 20th of December. And just 5 days before Christmas, and I was the eldest of four boys. I was 15, turning 16 the next year. My brother was 14. I also had a brother who had just turned 8, and my youngest brother was just about to turn 5. So he was still 4.
Oh.
So can you imagine what that was like? And as you know, Kerry, back in the late 70s, there was a lot of taboo around discussing suicide.
Yeah.
So it was very, very hard when I went back to school in year 11, and no one wanted to talk about it. I mean, I didn't want to talk about it as well because I was ashamed that my dad had taken his life. And, one minute he was there, and the next minute he's gone. And people are calling up, and anyone listening can relate to this, that once someone dies suddenly, people that don't expect it, and they'll try and get in contact. So there were lots of phone calls because he'd already been done a lot for recovering alcoholics. He was he went to AA.
Oh, right.
He used to go and give talks in the jails and everything. And he would be the one that all the recovering alcoholics would contact because he was the model recovered alcoholic. But it just shows what can happen in life. It's very unpredictable. So suddenly, you've gone from having this role model father, successful in advertising, great family man, and then he's gone. And you're having to face up to life going into year 11. And I still wanted to be a journalist, and I still continued to write, but it was very, very challenging and very confronting for the whole family.
What did you do with that pain as a young 15-year-old back then?
I just channeled my working life into that, and I wanted to kind of, in a way, honor his legacy. But of course, that's not really the smart thing to do because I don't think I dealt with it at the time. I didn't really face up to it. I tried to push it aside. I tried to bury myself in my work and my studies at school. My results suffered a bit in year 11. I definitely didn't do as well as I did in year 10. By year 12, I'd recovered a bit, but I think I didn't really properly address it at the time because, that's what we did back in the day when we were teenagers. We just tried to ignore it and just continue to go on with our lives. But looking back now, all these decades later, I know it affected all of us in different ways. But in the years that would come after that, I did deal with it and I did sort of try to address it. And I feel now that it's not affecting me like it did, obviously when I was a young adult. But it was something that I would have to deal with in future years.
Yeah, which is often the case, isn't it?
It is. And what's helped me over the years is just doing some self-development work, doing meditation, and kind of working out what really makes me tick and look at some of the behavior patterns that I've developed over the years. So, but it wasn't easy, and I can relate to anyone who's gone through a similar experience with a parent, with a spouse, with a child, with a loved one. It's an extremely difficult thing to go through.
Yeah, and our suicide rates have been climbing. But do you think it's because we're hearing more about it these days?
Yeah, I think the rates are, as you say, slightly climbing, but it's more about that the figures are out there for everyone to see. And now there isn't that sort of taboo around mental health issues, around suicide. So I think it's slightly increased, but the awareness has increased tenfold, and which is a good thing.
Yeah. I often hear young people, because, I also work in the men's mental health space, but I hear a lot of young guys and dads of younger guys these days saying that they feel like their sons can come home and say, oh, look, I'm struggling. I'm
Very
feeling
much.
angry, I'm feeling sad. Whereas back in the day, the role modelling was, eat cement, don't talk about that, harden up, son. And so I think we've come a long way in that respect.
I agree with you. And, our mutual friend, Justin Gage from Mates in Construction here in Brisbane is doing a fantastic job with tradies. And that's the typical Aussie male, isn't it? And when you talk about, have a concrete milkshake and continue to work, the tradies were the ones that were always the tough ones, right? The tough guys. But people like Justin are doing really important things in that space because it doesn't matter if you're a tradesperson, whether you're a journalist, whether you're an actor, whether you're a doctor, a lawyer, engineer, it does not matter because we're all affected by mental health challenges. And I think society is increasingly challenging, what we've seen since the pandemic and our cost of living and also devices, the fact that everyone has a smartphone now, which is in a way kind of diluting who we really are as people because there's always that entertainment at an arm's length.
That's right. And I heard some statistics the other day that 1 in 3 Australians now are feeling lonely.
Yeah, that's true.
It's very, very sad, isn't it? And, I'm working in the business of trying to connect people, as are you, which is so important. And connection is the opposite of addiction. We've heard that so often. But yeah, social media is really having such a profound and devastating effect on our young people. And people in general as far as loneliness and connection goes in society.
It really is. And I see this every day. So, as well as doing my radio show on 101 FM Logan every week, south of Brisbane, I'm also working at the ABC as a journalist on the news website. So, I'm working with people across generations, and I'm seeing, the people that are born after the year 2000. I'm working with people born after the year 2000. It shows you how young they are.
Yeah.
But I realize that it's a very challenging life, and loneliness and lack of connection is one of the biggest things that we're dealing with now. And I'm a bit like you, Kerry. I love to have a chat with people, and I love to just find out about people. I think they're fascinating, but a lot of the younger generation, I think, in a way, don't have those skills as much. Probably because they went through COVID when they were teenagers, and they are less outward focused, I think, in a large way. I would say that's my observation. Of course, there are exceptions to that, but across the board, every generation, we're dealing with challenges about trying to connect with people, trying to find our purpose in life, and just finding joy.
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head there, totally. Jace, let's talk about your career and how vast it has been, because it's really taken you. You've done like a Leyland Brothers, haven't you? You've been, and for the young people that are listening, Leyland Brothers, check out the song I've Been Everywhere. But you've been to so many different places and worked in so many different arenas. Tell us a bit about the journey that you forged against all odds after your dad's suicide, and what a wonderful driver of that to carry on his legacy.
Yeah, and it wasn't easy either, Kerry, because once I had that experience, when my dad took his own life, I was going into year 11. I was 15, turning 16. When I wanted to kind of pursue my journalism dreams, and in year 12, I had the English teacher from hell who thought that I had no ability in English, which I think didn't reflect the marks I was getting, but she didn't like me personally. And she brought my mum up to the school and told her, Jason's never going to make it in journalism. He should try another profession. And I'd already been working in journalism as a, weekend warrior for a year and a half or 2 years. So I heard that and it made me even more determined. And then I was fortunate enough to get a cadetship at the Sydney Morning Herald, Australia's oldest newspaper, and did well there. But then when I moved into TV about 4 years later, at Channel 7 in Sydney, my first TV boss took me aside and said, Jason, you're not going to ever make it in broadcasting. You should go back to newspapers.
Oh, how shattering.
Yeah, exactly. And, I was 21 there. And I have to admit, Kerry, that I wasn't very good. I was still learning the game, but I knew that I had the talent and determination, and I was willing to work hard, and I was able to turn things around. And in my 20s, I headed over to the UK. And as you mentioned, I worked initially for Sky News, and I was a sports presenter and reporter there. I worked also with the BBC. I was the first Australian sports presenter on BBC World, which I'm very proud of. Then I went to the US, and I was the first Australian sports presenter on CNN out of Atlanta, Georgia. I also worked for NBC as a local news reporter in Denver, Colorado. And then I moved to Asia when I was about to turn 40. And I launched programs there as the main host of ESPN Sports Center based out of Singapore. I went to India a lot to do shows. Malaysia, I built a team. And we came back to Australia around the time of the pandemic. And since then, as you know, I've been very much involved with radio, working with 4BC, ABC Local Radio, and now 101 FM, which is a community station, which I love volunteering to do. So it's been an incredible ride, and I don't think I expected to achieve as much as I did. And I know that sounds probably, I don't know if it sounds egocentric.
No, it doesn't at all, because your greatest mentor passed away, and then you were told by two prominent people in your life that you weren't going to succeed. And I think it's just fascinating. And I really wanted to kind of stop you back there, but not stop you because I needed to hear everything that you'd done. But most people would give up. And you didn't. You dug in, and that just takes a real certain characteristics to be able to do that.
Yeah, I think I was very determined and resilient, and that was probably an innate characteristic that I had, growing up playing a lot of sport as we did in the 60s and 70s, growing up in Australia and Sydney. We were a very active generation. So maybe some resilience was developed from that. But every setback that I had made me much more determined. And I realized I had a lot to learn when it came to getting better. And it wasn't until my 30s that I really started to have success in broadcasting because I was just trying so hard. Sometimes you can try too hard in life, Kerry. And I'm sure you can relate to that, where you want something so much, you just keep getting in your own way.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I did. But through some self-development things that I did, meditation, I did acting, played music. So in a way, I changed the focus from myself and made it externally focused. So
Yeah,
instead
I
of
like
thinking
that.
I'm going to screw up and I'm not going to be any good, I thought, how can I serve my audience? How can I entertain them? And that a light went off. And I think the acting and singing did that because when I was doing that, I put myself in the seats of people watching and I thought, wow, suddenly I'm not feeling self-conscious anymore. So now, having done it for over 40 years, it's something that comes naturally to me. But one thing I've got into recently is training. So now I'm starting to train people in presentation, broadcasting, and I enjoy that. And I think the reason I can teach people and train people is because I wasn't the naturally gifted one. I was the one who had to do it the hard way and had to show resilience to get through it.
And did you always dream of this career as a young child, or was it only in your teenage years that you started to develop this desire, seeing what your dad did?
I think I always dreamed of doing something similar to this. I remember playing backyard cricket or backyard touch footy and doing my own commentary, playing and commentating at the same time. And so I fulfilled a dream by becoming a sports broadcaster and a sports presenter, a commentator. I don't do that anymore, but that's something I did for many years and with great success. Yeah, I think because I was quite good at writing, I always had a flair for writing and creative expression. And I could see what my dad was doing. I could see him coming home with the storyboards for commercials. They have an image here, an image there, an image there. And that's how they develop the commercials, right? And he was a good artist. I'm not a good artist. One of my brothers is a good artist. And I'm thinking, wow, I don't really want to do what my dad does with TV ads, but I want to do something like that where you can express yourself, where you can entertain people. I love entertaining people. That to me, if I'm doing a radio show and you're listening, Kerry, and you enjoy it, even if you just enjoy the music, I know I've selected the songs that you really enjoyed, and that gives me a good feeling.
Oh, that's great. I love that. You're a bit of a dark horse. I didn't know you sang as well. We've got a bit in common, Jason.
Well, it's funny, Kerry, that I used to sing quite a lot, and I was even busking. I went to Paris when I took a break from journalism after I left Sky News in 1991. I had my guitar and I grew a moustache and I hooked up with some friends there and we did busking, and this was a long time ago in the early 90s. And, we had some success and I wrote songs, but it's almost like something I've done in the past. It's like a chapter that's finished. And now when I sing, I can still sing a bit, but I remember I was a much better singer 30 years ago because if you don't do something, you lose it, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. That's right. Use it or lose it. That's
Very much.
Yeah.
Like it's like a foreign language, isn't it?
Yeah, I know. Yeah. The physio told me that, but it goes with everything, doesn't it?
It does.
With your sports broadcasting, that I often like to tell the listeners how I met the guests because I've met a lot of the guests and invited them on and others I've just reached out to randomly. But it was very interesting how we came into contact because I had a very dear friend back in my drinking days, Ian Manning. And Ian was sadly an alcoholic and had a gambling problem. And I knew that he'd gone over to Hong Kong and died in mysterious circumstances. And it had always plagued me. I'd always really wanted to know what happened to him. And one night I was up doing a bit of Googling and I see this article about Ian Manning in Hong Kong. And the person that wrote the article was you, Jason. And I reached out to you and I said, oh, can you talk to me more about this? Ian was a great friend of mine and a very troubled soul, but that was really part of the time in my journey when I really, really needed people in my life. And Ian, even though I only knew him for a short period of time, really made me feel connected. And it was a time when I was very lonely. And so, he really played such a great role in my life. And then to hear how his life ended up was really shattering. So I really felt some closure when I came in contact with you and you were able to share the story with me. And you're a very good journalist, and the article was fantastically written, I must say.
Oh, thanks, Kerry. Yeah, Ian Manning, we should just explain to our listeners. He was a racing writer on the Sydney Morning Herald. And when I joined the Sydney Morning Herald, and I've just spoken about the time that I was 17 after I lost my dad, a couple of years earlier, got the cadetship, and I love sport reporting. So I ended up in the sports department, the Sydney Morning Herald. And Ian was a few years older than me, not, maybe 3 or 4 years older than me. And he was already an established racing writer. He was a very flashy guy from the western suburbs of Sydney, open neck shirt, medallions, quite skinny and tall, and
very vivacious. He just
had a lot of charisma, and he was really nice to me. I remember that, because when you're young and you're a nobody, some people just ignore you and don't treat you well. But Ian was always really nice, and he was always very encouraging. And as you mentioned, Kerry, he was a big drinker. I wasn't really a drinker because I'd seen what happened with my dad, so I didn't go to the pub with him or anything, but I did socialize with him a bit. He got married. I went to his wedding. Would you believe it? But he had this charisma about him, and we kind of lost touch. And but several years later, I heard the sad story that he died in Macau, which is near Hong Kong, while working for the South China Morning Post, which is a paper I wrote a column for, actually. And I was in Hong Kong about 2008, 2009 period, because my wife's from Hong Kong. So we lived there for about 6 months, and I wasn't doing much. And I thought, I want to do some research about Ian Manning, because I know he died mysteriously in Macau many years ago. So I went down this rabbit hole, Kerry, of doing all this research about what happened to Ian Manning. I went to Macau, to the Cutting Library. I went to the bridge where the car that he was in drove off mysteriously. And there were other people who were killed as well in the accident, including another journalist. So I wrote this big article. And the article, at that time, I wasn't working for the Sydney Morning Herald. I just contributed it. I wrote it for free just because I wanted to find out what happened to Ian Manning. And I interviewed the best man at his wedding, who I'd kept in touch with. I interviewed a couple of other, fellow journalists who were friends with Ian. So it was kind of a colorful article about what a character he was and the investigation into what happened. And because of his connections, Kerry, to gambling and also drinking, there was always that mystery about, was this related to organized crime? Was it related to something he'd done? The honest answer was, we don't know, probably not. Him and his friends were drinking, and they were in a car, and they basically drove off a bridge and into the water and died. I think 1 or 2 people were rescued. So it still remains a bit of a mystery, but it was something that I just felt I needed to do, because I had that memory of Ian Manning as this friendly, knockabout guy, flashy, who I'd see in the office, and we'd always have a good chat. And that's the wonderful thing, that because I wrote that article, Kerry, we met and we've been able to collaborate a little bit on some things around men's mental health.
Yes, absolutely. After the way you wrote that article, I just had a real sense that men's mental health was something that was very important to you without even realising what had happened in your own life. And I remember the message that I reached out and said, is men's mental health something that you're very passionate about, Jason? And your answer was straight in there, yes, of course. And so that's when I invited you to write the foreword for my third book in my series, Stories of Hope, Light Bulb Moments Through the Eyes of Men. And it was an honour to have you host a couple of my events around Australia as well. Justin was there with us, Justin G. Ange, and a few other of the authors in that book, who have all had their own amazing stories about the light bulb moment that really pulled them out of the darkness and set them onto a greater path.
Yeah, I think that was a great honor to be involved. And immediately I wanted to reach out and help, because I know what a tough time people are going through. And, I remember we did one event on the Sunshine Coast where you're based. We also did another event at Logan Library where I do the radio show. And I've continued to do the odd event around men's mental health for Logan through the Logan City Libraries because I still feel passionate about it, and I think that book was so important to give those stories. And I've featured some of the people in the book on my radio shows over the last couple of years, which has been great. So yeah, look, I think I still, in a way, I want to do more. I want to be able to do more, and I know that every day I'm hearing about things. Almost every day I'm hearing about the challenges that men are going through. I'm hearing about men who take their own lives, people that I know or friends of friends. It's still pretty shocking. And the thing is, Kerry, the thing that I find really sad is that major media organizations, including the one I work for, one of the ones I work for, do very little coverage of this. It's not kind of hip. It's not trendy.
Yeah.
But it's so, so important. And I'm going to say something a bit controversial here is that, unfortunately, white, straight males who are not so young, we're not really perceived in society as people of great value anymore. I think it's sad that a lot of men feel ostracized, and I'm not one of them. I'm one of the lucky ones, so I feel absolutely fine. But I just notice, I look around and I see people of my age or similar age, and they feel really that they're just kind of rejected from society in Australia. And I think we have a terrible problem around ageism in Australia.
Yeah.
It's a very ageist society, and you get past 50 and people are writing you off, particularly with men and women. Women go through the same thing. So I think this is a shame. And when I go to Asia and work there, I see how much they value people of greater experience and age compared to Australia.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? And I mean, the older a person gets, the more wisdom they have to offer.
In
the
theory,
world.
at least.
Yeah.
Not always, but often, yeah.
As you hear this story, what Kerry's discussing might be resonating strongly with you. Perhaps you've experienced something similar yourself and are looking for support. Kerry Atherton is an experienced counsellor and wellbeing coach and has private sessions available if you or someone you know needs some help. You don't have to deal with trauma, addiction, PTSD, and abuse alone. If you'd like to talk about today's episode or your own experiences, book a session with Kerry at empowerlifesolutions.com.au or check the link in the show notes and embrace a future filled with hope. Now back to the episode.
Jason, why do you think that is in Australia?
I think because, Kerry, we're a bit of a young, naive society sometimes. We're a young country compared to Europe, even compared to North America. And we lack maturity at times. And I think that's one of the reasons why we don't value the older generation. I see it when I'm working at ABC with some of the youngsters that they have very little interest in not just me, but anyone who's sort of above the age of 40 sometimes. And that's a shame because of the decades, the years we've spent on the planet, we have a lot of experiences that we can really share with them and potentially help them.
And I think the Aussie culture has always been cut anyone down who's going well.
Yeah,
Don't let anybody rise. Yeah, don't let anybody rise up too far. And I still am seeing so often, especially on LinkedIn and amongst men's mental health organisations, a lack of collaboration. There's a lot of me, my organisation, this is what I'm doing, but there's not. We need more collaboration. If more organisations collaborated together, the greater the force for good would be.
You're really correct there, Kerry. And when you talk about that lack of collaboration, lack of support, having been away from Australia for 25 years and coming back, I have noticed that people don't help each other enough here. And I'll look in my industry, in the media industry, people are very unhelpful because they feel insecure. And I think they feel that because the media is changing so much, maybe their job will be taken away. I won't help this person because they could become a threat.
Yeah.
I see it very, very often. It's not the same when in Asia or in other places I've worked. It really is something that I think it shows a lack of maturity for a society. And of course, with the men's mental health space or wellness space, it would be much better if people would work together more, because then that way more people in society are being helped.
Yeah, and I love the fact that you get me in to like talk on the radio when we've got like mental health week and stuff like that. And
yeah,
my slogan is "Together is better. Don't do life alone."
Very true, very true. And I think, every generation, makes a judgment about other generations. But one thing about our generation, Kerry, is that I do think that we helped each other. I think we were that kind of generation. And I was talking to some of my school friends actually the other day, and we were kind of looking at how life had changed. And of course, the budget came out not so long ago with changes that are going to affect older Australians. And I'm thinking, we are a different generation compared to the younger generation. And I think potentially because it was before technology too, that we grew up, that we are in a way more collaborative. We're more resilient. We are very active. We didn't have smartphones. We didn't have computers when we were teenagers. We were out there playing and riding bikes and doing everything else, and playing lots of sports. So I think that's part of the reason why our generation is perhaps different. Of course, every generation will judge the other generation. So I'm not saying they're better or worse.
Yeah, and I love to collaborate with all generations. So
Me too. Me
yeah.
too.
And it's interesting. A lot of the clients that I'm getting these days are young people with drug and alcohol problems.
Yeah, I know. And, I was just actually on ABC radio last night, and we were talking about society not learning the lessons, because remember in the 60s, right? There was always that drug problem, and then into the 70s as well. But society is still having major drug problems today.
Yeah.
So mankind does not learn from its past mistakes. We look at wars, right? The invasion of Iran and all these endless wars in the Middle East. And we didn't learn anything from Afghanistan and Iraq. So it's funny, isn't it, how we do not tend to learn lessons and the problems that keep coming for every generation.
That's so true. Jason, you've interviewed some very famous people like who's who in the zoo, really. Just rattle off a few names just so our listeners can hear the interesting journey that you've had.
Well, I did a lot of sports interviews like Roger Federer, George Foreman, of course, a lot of musicians. I just spoke to Stuart Copeland from the Police, but all the Australian legends like Daryl Braithwaite and Ross Wilson and Greedy Smith from Mental as Anything, I was good mates with. I've interviewed former British Prime Minister Tony Blair, Bob Hawke. I was actually backstage at the Parkinson Show, Channel 10 in Sydney, when Bob Hawke was going on with his impersonator. There was a guy, you'll remember, Kerry, who used to impersonate Bob Hawke, a guy called Max Gillies. Remember him?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, so I was down there and doing a story about both of them on the night that they were on the show together. So I met Parkinson, Mr. Hawke, how are you? Max Gillies, the actor who did it. So I'm with the two Bob Hawkes and Michael Parkinson backstage, Channel 10 in Sydney. You remember they used to be at North Ryde.
That's right.
Yeah, so many people. And one message that really I think is important that Roger Federer told me, arguably the greatest tennis player of all time, but you've got Novak Djokovic, and this is male player, of course, Rafael Nadal. He said to me, this is a very important thing when it comes to life and dealing with setbacks. He said to me, Jason, I won about 80% of my matches on the tennis tour. I won 20 Grand Slams. But did you know that I lost 45%, almost half of my points?
Oh, wow.
I said, yeah, you're right. Yeah, because, in a tennis match, you can lose lots of points, but win the game, right? Or win the set. So he said, the way that I dealt with the disappointment of losing those points, that 45% of points, almost half, that helped me become the champion that I was. So life, a lot of times, is dealing with disappointment, with things that don't pan out. And my daughter's 16, and I'm trying to teach her that as well, that developing that resilience, that ability to move on from things that don't go right. So yeah, Roger Federer is one of my favorite interviews. Such a nice guy. He's retired now, as you know, but he just had this grace about him that I always remember, that I wish I had, not just on the court, but off the court as well.
Oh, that's a great message. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, and he's such a respectful guy, and I always like people who show respect to everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And at the end of the day, no matter how famous someone is or how much they earn, we're all human when the lights go out.
That's true. And I'm very kind of normal when it comes to celebrities. There aren't many celebrities, if any, that kind of go, oh my God, it's a celebrity, because I've interviewed so many and I realized that they've all got flaws.
That's right. Yeah.
And, there's this thing about charisma, Kerry, and you would have seen this as well, that sometimes there are actors or politicians that have this sort of fairy dust around them, and you sort of fall in love with them on the screen or, on TV.
Yeah.
But when you actually meet them, you realize that they're not always the best person. They've just got that ability to kind of suck you in. So I have met some people that had a lot of charisma that I kind of liked. But when I met them, I'm like, oh, I'm not really getting a great feeling about who you are as a person.
Yeah. Yeah. And whose story were you touched by the most on a human to human level?
I was quite touched by the story of a guy that I got to know only a few months before he died. And it was kind of an interesting one. So I mentioned Greedy Smith. He was the singer of Mental as Anything. And of course, the famous song is Live It Up. And he went to the same school as me, Kerry, North Sydney Boys High, not too far from where you went to school in Sydney.
Yeah, that's right. Monty St. Angelo.
Yeah, just down the road, down Miller Street. I always liked Mental as Anything. As you remember, Kerry, they were a really fun band. They had lots of good songs. And I always wanted to meet Greedy Smith. Because I'd started to do interviews with musicians in 2019, I just got back from living overseas just before the pandemic. I was doing an interview with a musician called Rex Go, who played with Jenny Morris. He played in Air Supply. He's actually a Singaporean guy. So you might remember those Asian guitarists.
I think I remember him. Yeah.
Yes, I think there's a few Asian guitarists. The guys from Hush as well. That's the other one.
Oh, I think that's the one I'm thinking of.
But in Air Supply, Rex Go was the guitarist. So I was at Rex Go's place in the Sydney suburb of Glebe, and I said, I went to school with Greedy Smith, and we're having a school reunion. And I mean, I didn't go to school with him. He was years ahead. He was 6 years ahead. And I'd love to get him as our guest speaker for our 40th school reunion. So Rex gave me his number. Cut a long story short, I called him a few times, didn't get through. Then I finally called him. He goes, come and meet me. Let's meet for coffee. I'm thinking, oh, wow, I'm going to meet Greedy Smith. And I went to a cafe on the North Shore of Sydney, had a coffee with him. And I'm like, wow. And I was just sort of delighted to meet him. I wasn't like in awe of him. And we did some interviews as well in his car. So we kind of became mates. He couldn't do the reunion because he was playing that night, but he did a video for all the boys in my year. So, hi, I'm Greedy Smith from Mental as Anything, North Sydney Boys High. I remember the schoolyard, great stuff.
Yeah.
So we kind of became mates in 2019, text messages back and forth. I met up with him for lunch. I remember he drove me in his car to visit my friends at SBS. Anyway, and he kept the band going because a lot of the other members had left. Martin Plaza, who was the other lead singer, didn't have good health. So Greedy was continuing the band with new members. And I sent him a text message. I'd gone to Hong Kong to MC an event. I said, Greedy, I'm going to Hong Kong. Just want to let you know that the band is sounding fantastic. I watched a clip on YouTube. You're singing all Martin songs beautifully. The nips are getting bigger and all those kind of songs. Apocalypso.
Good song.
And he sent me a message back and he said, I'm a lucky boy. 3 days later, he dropped dead of a heart attack.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that was the last message. And he was only 63. And I'm thinking, wow, this is, I'd only known him for 3 months. We'd met in a cafe. We'd become mates. And he'd had all these plans to do things. And the sad thing was that he died of a heart attack. And you know what? I became friends with him and I'd given him a book. And he loved reading. And his fiancée, Fiona, in that time, I was watching the funeral on Zoom and in that period when we didn't travel as much between states. And the book I gave him was placed in the coffin with his mouth organ and also the best of Mental's.
Oh, really?
Yes. Yeah. So that's the last, and it was open at page 27, which was the page he got to. So Fiona and I become good friends now. Because after that, I said, Fiona, we got to meet. And she said, yeah, Greedy had spoken about you and, said he'd become mates and all that. And he actually dropped dead very sadly when Fiona and Greedy were moving house. They were about to move into a new flat, new chapter. And that's when he died of a heart attack. He got sent to hospital and unfortunately they couldn't revive him. So that was a beautiful story for me, Kerry, that showed me exactly how unpredictable life is. and how we just don't know when something is going to change, when our days are going to be ended. Our days are numbered. Whether it's my father when I'm 15 years of age, who died at the age of 43, or whether it's Greedy Smith, one of Australia's beloved singers. So that really touched me. But I felt so blessed to have met him and to have got to know him over those last few months of his life. And that did inspire me to talk to more musicians and find out about those stories. But it blew me away when the book that I gave him was put in the coffin.
Oh, I know. And when you're telling that story, it just really came across my mind that we never know who we're talking to, what they're going through. And so many people think that they don't have much to give others, or that a story that they have in their life doesn't mean anything to somebody. And so many people walk around and withhold so much, where they could be planting seeds that really touch someone else's life in a massive way. Just knowing that you gave him that book, and you just don't know what was in that book that really spoke to him just before he died.
I know. I was really blown away. I was moved when I heard that. And he was such a nice guy too, that he was interested in me. And we spoke about people with charisma, the sort of narcissist type of person that they're not interested in anyone but themselves.
That's right. Yeah.
But even though Greedy was one of our most famous musicians, I felt like we were equal partners. We were sharing things about our lives, and that showed me. And someone like Roger Federer is the same. He was really just a genuine person and a very imbalanced person.
Who's the most inspirational and humble female that you've ever interviewed?
That's a good question, actually. I quite liked, Zali Stegel. She was a skier, and now she's the member for Pittwater. So I was covering the World Alpine Championships when she came from nowhere to win the gold medal in Colorado. And she was a young girl from Manly. And then years later, and I always thought that she was really down to earth and really nice. And I was living overseas at that time. That was 1999. All these years later, I seen she's become a politician, and she's won a seat as an independent for Pittwater. So she's still the member for Pittwater as an independent in Sydney. And this was someone that I covered as a young skier. So she was someone that I really admired because of what she achieved. And she did it in a way that she still came across as a very lovely, down-to-earth person. So yeah, she was one of the ones that I really thought was good. I interviewed Sam Kerr when she won the Asian Football Awards. I was emceeing that event. She was quite fun as well. Yeah, so there've been some great female athletes as well that I've interviewed over the years. I actually liked Venus Williams. She was lovely. I wasn't so keen on Serena Williams, but I love Venus Williams.
Right.
She was really lovely.
Isn't it wonderful watching someone's journey? I mean, we're two of the people that don't carry that cut you down tall poppy syndrome. We actually celebrate and champion people, but watching people's journeys and somebody that you've met a long time ago and seeing them succeed and come full circle and do amazing things. I mean, when you were talking, I was thinking about how I get to see that in the rooms of AA, which is kind of where we started, didn't we, with your dad in AA, but I get to sit there and see people that have come in at the absolute rock bottom of life, and I see them transform before my very eyes.
Yeah, I actually went to an AA meeting a few months ago just because I hadn't been for years. I used to go with my dad, back in the 70s. Because
your dad probably knew my dad, because when my dad passed away, he'd been sober for 60 years.
Is that right?
So
well, no doubt.
AA together.
Yeah, if it was on the North Shore of Sydney, then it's probably good. Yeah, probably a very good chance,
Yeah.
In fact, my dad, I think I can share this. He was at AA meeting with Barry Humphries one time.
My dad was too.
Really?
Yeah. We probably met each other. Did you go to Alateen?
I don't think I did. I think I just went to the regular AA meetings, but I was aware of Alateen. Yeah, I was aware of it. But I went to quite a lot of meetings because I found it really interesting, because I like seeing the journey that people go on with their evolution when it comes to their recovery. And I don't think I ever had that issue with addiction. I just don't think I don't drink now. I haven't drunk for years, but I don't think I have that gene in myself. However, going to the AA meetings was always very interesting. Even as a 13, 14-year-old, I would go and I'd have very deep conversations with my dad. Because remember, for those 10 years, between the ages of 5 and 15, he never drank. He never did anything. And he was a model family man.
Yeah.
But going to that meeting a few months ago, there's one here in Brisbane, and they do it in a park.
Oh, right.
So I'd cycled past it, and I'm thinking, I bet you that's an AA meeting. I could tell. And so I wanted to go along and just sort of see what it was like, because it would been the last time I went was probably 1977, and that was the year my dad died at the end of the year. So I'm back there, and I enjoyed it. And I said, "Yeah, look, I'm the son of an alcoholic, and I haven't been to an AA meeting for years, and I'm just here to hear your stories, to understand why you're here." People, you go around the group, and everyone shares. So yeah, I found it really interesting, and I've always enjoyed that kind of therapy and people sharing. I really enjoy it, not from a voyeuristic, kind of point of view, just because I think you learn a lot from seeing other people's journeys.
Yeah, and you and I have got that in common. We very much love people's stories, and we're storytellers.
Yeah, I think that's why I became a journalist, because of that.
I wanted to, but alcoholism and pill addiction stole my dreams of what I wanted to do. And I incidentally ended up being a counsellor, mental health coach, podcast host, and helping people solve the problems of their life, which is something that I really love. And I'd have to say that if I had a choice to go back and none of my journey happened and I had the idyllic, perfect lifestyle and became a famous jazz musician or actress, which was what I wanted to do, I would have chose what I've been doing all these years because, as you know, that human interaction and that human connection with people that you get to do on a deep level when someone allows you into their life, there's just such a blessing and joy and sacredness in that a lot of people don't get to experience.
Oh, for sure. So your journey was different to what maybe you planned and thought, but in a way you've been able to do very important work and incorporate some of those original goals that you had, hosting a podcast or going on radio or whatever, TV. It's in a way, you're revisiting those original dreams that you had.
Yeah, so true. Jace, as we kind of close up now, I know you've talked about your self-care strategies, but what have you done over the years to keep your own mental health in check?
Well, I've used meditation, Kerry. That's worked well for me. And I'm working in media for 46 years now. And you know enough about it, having met people and had friends of people in the media, that it is a bit of a crazy world. And
uncertainty is the word, isn't it? That
uncertainty.
Everybody is facing like never before.
Exactly. And it's a dog-eat-dog world. And I experienced that when I moved from newspapers to TV, and not just my first chief of staff saying, you've got to go and change careers, you're no good at this. But in the newsroom, there were lots of other journos that could see I was young and I was weak. And they were kind of like, it was a bit like a feeding frenzy in the shark pool, They wanted to, it's that dog eat dog or shark eat shark kind of environment.
Yeah.
So what helped me was a bit of spirituality, meditation, and that has helped me maintain a career and realize. So by doing meditation, by doing some self-development, and there are lots of different ways you can do this, you get a perspective about where you are in life. And I've already spoken about the external facing thing rather than internal facing thing. I think if people can do that, and Kerry, you're volunteering, you're doing a lot of work because your focus is not just on yourself, it's external. And that's anyone listening, I would say, if you can do that, that's a start towards your recovery. And one of the tools that helped me do that was meditation, because you are going, in a way, you're looking down on your own life through meditation or visualization techniques. And that way, you're not so caught up in it all. You take a step back, and all the emotion and all the frustration and all the anger, and you let that go, that disappointment, you surrender that. And then you are able to move forward in your life. And that's why I've been able to do this for 46 years and able to stay sane. Also, physical fitness. I'm very fit like yourself, Kerry. I love to work out. I really watch my weight. I try and eat healthy. And I have a teenage daughter, so that's kept me young. You had kids a bit younger than me. But I've had to
I've got teenage grandkids.
Yeah, I know. So, and I'm older than you, so that gives you an idea that I had my daughter when I was turning 48, which is a long time ago. So
You still look young, Jace.
Thank you.
Thank you. So do you. Only. Thank you.
But I was going to say that it's by having these practices and having the self-discipline to do them every day, meditated every day for the last 35 years.
Yeah.
Worked out every day just about for the last 40 years or more. And these disciplines and tools have helped keep me sane and kept me going forward. And I had no idea I'd be able to achieve what I did, but that was all because my focus went from internal, thinking about myself and all this and all the sort of worries and disappointments, and thinking, how do I serve life? How do I help others?
That's so great. Yeah, I'm really with you on that. Jason, as we finish now, what's your message for the world?
My message for the world is enjoy every moment and don't procrastinate. One of my best friends from school, Marcus, who was the fittest guy that he was the fastest runner in the school. He'd win all the sports competitions, never drank, never smoked. He dropped dead at the age of 59 on Australia Day a few years ago. And, he never saw that coming. So I think if we can live as if we've only got a few months to go, rather than, what am I going to do for the next few years, then that's a way to start. Live every moment as if it's your last, because it could well be your last.
And so, as you've heard from Jason today, anything is possible if you don't give up. And it's been a wonderful time, Jason, of hearing about your amazing career and who you are as a person. And I just love that message so much about thinking about a purpose outside ourselves.
Yeah, and also, Kerry, I think to laugh at yourself and not take yourself too seriously. And that was another thing that I learned. And I think part of that was doing improv acting, where you're laughing at yourself, you're coming up with stuff, and you know that, having done some acting, and
that's right.
It's a great way to just have fun. And if you can find something that can make you feel joy, and singing is a great way of feeling joy. Acting is, maybe walking the dog. I love walking my dog. I get a lot of joy from that. So find the joy in your life and do something that's going to make you get out of bed in the morning and enjoy the day. Embrace the fun things, whether it's, going for a body surf or playing tennis, not golf. Golf's a bit too frustrating for me, but everybody has their own thing that they enjoy doing. I think that if we can find that joy, Kerry, that is a big step towards improving our lives.
Yeah, find a purpose one day at a time and never give up. Jason, thank you so much.
Thank you, Kerry. I really enjoyed the conversation, and I appreciate you bringing me on. And it's never going to be easy, but as I said, never give up. That's been my motto, and I'm trying to instill that in my daughter as well.
Thanks to all our listeners. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to Stories of Hope with Kerry Atherton. If this conversation helped you, please consider sharing the podcast with a friend or leaving a rating and review on your podcast player. If you'd like to find out more about Kerry Atherton, head to storiesofhope.com.au, where you can purchase her books or find her next event. Check the show notes for links and information about our guest in this episode, and remember, you don't have to walk your path alone.